got multiple questions here, so I'll just read them as is. Show of hands, this is for all of you. Show of hands, which of you are pro-life, meaning you don't believe in killing preborn babies? Okay, I'll read it again. This is show of hands, which of you are pro-life, meaning you don't believe in killing preborn babies? Okay. Once again, show of hands, if the Abortion Human Rights Act, which I believe now has a number, makes it to the floor, will you vote for it? Show of hands. You haven't read it?
Haven't read it, and that's a very complicated question. So if you want us each to speak to it, we can, but I don't think that's a yes or no.
Okay, well, this is an opportunity to speak to it. And you know what, and I'll just throw the third part in. If you would not vote for the Abortion Human Rights Act, explain why not, and amendments that would be required to get your vote.
Well, because I haven't read the act, it hasn't come to us. I can't speak to any amendments, but just the general topic of, thank you, that's better. Just the general topic of it, I think you realize we are all pro-life. So we have different ways of looking at accomplishing the goal of abolishing abortion. And the Human Rights Act is one way, but it may not be the way that we choose individually to think that it will be the most effective. So here's my thought. I've been very involved in anti-abortion legislation. I have stood up many times in the Senate to support bills or carry bills, and I've gotten awards from the anti-abortion groups, the pro-life groups. So I don't think we can question anybody's credentials here, because we are all of the same mind. However, I believe, and I don't know what my fellow legislators believe, that we have a cultural issue to talk about as well, because abortion has been legal in our country for a long time. And so if we pass, and I have to tell you, it will not pass. It won't even pass the Senate, I know that. But if we pass it and the governor signs it, which is very doubtful, then what you're going to have is you're going to have on June 30th, abortion is legal. On July 1st, when the new law goes into effect, abortion is not only illegal, but it is murder, and the various people will be put in prison. That is not realistic. It's not functional, it won't work. That's my opinion. I think we need to move toward our goal, and I'm very happy to hear that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which has been a thorn in the side of all anti-abortion legislation in Idaho, because those pieces of legislation that are most effective get sent to the Ninth Circuit and they kill them. So now, according to our former majority leader in the Senate, who is now the U.S. Attorney for Idaho, he said that the Ninth Circuit is really getting stronger. Their decisions are much more moderate, and with just a little bit more time and maybe another person on that Court of Appeals that is more conservative, we can have more assurance that we'll get a fair trial for these kinds of issues when they go to that Court of Appeals. So I think that there is optimism. We are making headway. It is not dramatic. It's not a big spotlight on the issue. See, we have solved the problem instantly, but these problems are complicated, and there's usually not an instant answer. So I appreciate that.
My turn to be in the hot seat. If you look at my RAC card, which is summarized on my business card that I used when I first ran, it doesn't say pro-life as the first issue. It says vigorously defend life. I think that's a step beyond just the pro-life position. This is an issue that I refuse to play politics on. It's hardball for me. The anti-abortion measure that's been proposed recognizes that in state statute now, abortion is considered murder. I don't know if you realize that. It is considered to be murder. However, there's a an exemption for prosecution. So we have it already on the books as murder. We're just going to look the other way and avoid prosecution of either the doctor or the mother, who are the two principal parties involved in this. I think we just need to remove that exemption. Some of the issues that have been brought up about prosecuting the mother, there are provisions in there that will give immunity, legal immunity, to the mother if she cooperates in the prosecution of the doctor that provides the abortion. Now, once one of those cases is even on its way to court, how many abortion doctors do you think are going to risk their profession and continue with that process? It will stop practically immediately here in this state. And I'm open to any questions if you have any. Thank you.
I want to touch on something that Senator Souza talked about, and that's the cultural transformation that needs to take place. And I want to go back to the issue of slavery and what it took in this country to not only to get slavery stopped, but the idea that African Americans were lesser people than white people were. Thomas Jefferson wanted to put the abolition of slavery in the Declaration of Independence, but yet Thomas Jefferson later, he continued to own slaves, although he always held that belief that slavery was wrong. He continued to hold slaves. My point with bringing up Thomas Jefferson is ever since this country was founded, there were people who did not believe that slavery was appropriate. Then we went another 60, 70 years, still legal. We fought a civil war. And then we passed constitutional amendments. We fought a civil war, passed constitutional amendments, and there were still many, many places in this country that treated African Americans not as equal citizens. And I use this example because we have a similar debate in the abortion industry that the preborn are not equal, and I believe that they are. But it took many, many years and a change of mind and a change of heart to make the belief that black people are equal to white people to come to fruition in this country. And it's still not that way in everybody's life, but it is for most people in this country, I believe. The provision to make abortion legal has been in effect since the decision in Roe versus Wade for decades. We would need to, I believe, we need to have a reversal in a court decision. I know that there are others in this room who believe that we can just make a law and it will be supreme to an incorrect, in my opinion, an incorrect court decision. I personally don't believe that we have the fortitude in this state from our Attorney General and our Governor to take that stand. So I don't believe that passing the Abortion Human Rights Act will save babies. My goal is to save babies as soon as possible. And so I think that trying to add restrictions onto where abortions are available does that the soonest way. And continuing to change hearts by having, being strong in where you stand, making doctors understand and make them not want to do abortions, and showing mercy to all people who are in this issue. And I lost a child, and I held that child in my arms after he was born. And I am 100% convinced that a child is a child from the moment of conception. But I do believe that we have to understand that people have different views on how to end the atrocious abortion industry. I give grace to those who disagree with me, and I would ask for the same for me.
I sincerely appreciate Senator Vick's views and hold them very closely to my heart. I have a 2.5-year-old son that I adore and means the world to me, and wholeheartedly am pro-life. I just found out my brother-in-law and sister-in-law yesterday are having a baby boy. They were in to look, and I think they're 14 weeks. So that tells you how early it's a human in there. It's a baby, and so it's an incredibly important issue for me. I think we have to be diligent in how we approach the issue in saving babies, and so how do we create and craft a law or a decision in the court system that saves as many babies as possible, and so that's why I certainly appreciate Senator Vick's views, and I don't want this to consume the entire session, so I will pass it along.
Very serious subject, and I couldn't state it any better than Senator Vick, so I'm not going to try. But I think this rolls into years and years and years ago. I had the fortune to have lunch with Senator Risch, and we were talking about the Republican Party. And he said something that we all know, and I took it to heart. He says, Jim, we're all Republicans. We believe in 95 to 99% of the same things. It's just a matter of how we accomplish it. And this is a huge issue, and not to be cold, but the key is, how do we make it better? How do we do it? I've had conversations with many of you in the room on various issues. We talk about getting it done in a fell swoop. We talk about incrementalism. The key is, how do we get this law changed effectively? What's our strategy to make it work? And I haven't looked at the Human Rights Act bill. It hasn't even been through committee yet. I'm not on that committee. But I've got to believe, and I'm not an attorney, but I've got to believe we need to do things that don't set us back and hopefully impact the Supreme Court. Because I think at the end of the day, that's where it's going to lie, is the Supreme Court, practically. So again, I want to save babies. I want to stop this practice, and I'm looking for the best way to do it.
Thank you. I actually agree that I'm afraid this has to happen in the courts. That's how abortion became legal in this country. A lot of people hide behind the court decision. They say, well, it's legal, so it must be okay, trying to satisfy things in their own heart. I think elections have consequences. I'm so grateful for the things that President Trump has done in our legal system, because we've had an uphill climb with judges. We have an example in the state of Idaho. There's a judge in Twin Falls, Judge Wildman. And we passed a bill a few years ago. All it said was that you had to go to a doctor to get the abortifacient, to basically the morning after pill. Very innocuous. A woman that has trouble with bladder infections, Representative Scott got up on the floor and said this: you have to see a doctor and have your analysis before they'll give you the medicine, even though everybody knows what it is. Yet for an abortion pill, you can do this on basically on the internet. And so we passed a law, and you'd think, no problem, right? Well, it got to Windmills Court. He did exactly what he's supposed to do. Planned Parenthood, you bring these to a federal judge, and they ruled that basically, if Idaho didn't roll back the law, he was going to rule that we would have to pay Planned Parenthood legal fees and everything else. I fault some of our Attorney General's office, because I don't think we were vigorously defended, as was brought up here. And so I believe that these people, this the court system, judicial activism just, there again, sets my hair on fire. But it's real, and we're faced with it. So we have to get people in office that will give us decent judges, constitutional judges. That's been a real problem, and we've lost a lot of our individual rights as a result of that. I believe the original question was, would you vote for the bill? I actually would vote for the bill. It does point out that, and I have read the bill, but it does point out a contradiction in Idaho code. In one section you say, if you do something that kills a fetus, it's murder, and then we make an exception. So it's a contradiction, and it points it out. Last Sunday at the airport, I spoke with the sponsor of this bill, and she said her hope is to get this out in the forefront so we can bring up the conversation. Because I also know a lot of churches, which we happen to be in one, don't talk on this subject very much because it's so divisive in the Christian community. A number of people that I know, really surprising me, have had abortions. And I'm thinking, wow, and yet they're sitting next to me in church. And so when you bring this up, it's divisive. And I've got it from good authority that a house divided cannot stand. And so we need to be united in these things. So we need to be very strategic. And so while I agree, I have a 4-month-old grandson at home. And my gosh, when I look at him and I think that people could actually murder one of these, it's stunning. And you're even getting places where, after they're born, they can change their mind. And so, I mean, we're going down a dangerous, dangerous path. And actually, as a Christian, I believe that God will judge America for this. This is not something that you can do lightly. This is a big deal. And so the question is, how do we get there from here? I believe, I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court, as it's changed a bit, and if President Trump doesn't get another term, let's find a place to hide. But I think he'll get another Supreme Court justice. Unfortunately, we saw the debacle that was because you can challenge, people can come make accusations, true or false, about somebody that's appointed to an office, and we don't, as Republicans, which I actually called my Senator Crapo, and I did talk to him, but I talked to people on his staff, because I said, we need to, if you're going to basically go after Kavanaugh again and investigate him for the 20th time, we need to investigate the accusers, which we don't do. We have the majority on that committee, and we could do that. And we need to make it not just a free pass for people that accuse these folks, because otherwise you're never going to get anybody to agree to be nominated to these offices, because it's not worth it. And the truth doesn't matter. It's just a question of that allegation. And so I think, unfortunately, as bad as it is, I think we're going to have to fix it through the courts. But that doesn't mean Idaho should not continue to try, continue to stand up for human life. And I'm so grateful that other states last session actually did do a lot of things for to try to stop the abortion industry. So anyway.
On the topic of abortion, I'm glad my biological mother never knew about it, because I never met her. Here's the good news though about the Ninth Circuit, 9 Western states, a liberal bastion of 29 judges. When President Trump took office, I believe the Republicans had an 11-member deficit. With the appointment of the 2 recent ones by President Trump, we're down to only 3-point difference from taking over. So that's good news.
Thank you. Well, I want to first point out that I was a board member of Open Arms Pregnancy Center about 3 years before I even considered running for office, and I have continued to be on that board. Our perspective is very much cultural. The culture must change so that someday Open Arms Pregnancy Center is not necessary. And when we talk about culture, it does relate back to the 1800s and the slavery issues, and the 60s when we were having the Martin Luther King was working so hard for equality. My objection is the courts. The power of the judiciary somehow is we just acquiesce that God has spoken, or the gods have spoken. And these individuals, whether the U.S. Supreme Court or our own Supreme Court, these individuals are in an oligarchical situation. They're able to dictate their own ideas, their own philosophies, their own ideology, and we somehow take that as gospel, as truth, as reality. And certainly, to the extent that the republic must function, that branch must function. But we're not seeing that reflect the culture. I want to stand by the discretion of the judges. Specifically, if it's already against the law to kill a baby in the womb, why do we make an exemption for those that deliberately, intentionally murder? So to the extent that this bill, and I have not read the whole thing, but anyway, to the extent that this bill simply repeals the exemption, will that not give a reasonable rational judiciary the opportunity to exercise discretion and look at the circumstances and begin to address the issue. Who is murdering these babies? And where's the money? Isn't it a financial thing? Well, we look at Planned Parenthood, it sure is. Try to cut their funding. Government funding murder? Let's see. So I've addressed the cultural, that's all I have to say about this. Thank you.